Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to my channel. This is part 2 of 10 best things I learned from this book called Tools of Titans by Tim Ferris, and how I managed to apply those lessons in my life as a full-time DPT student and a future physical therapist. If you guys are not really familiar with what I'm talking about, I recommend going back to part 1 of this video series, and I'll link that up right here. But I have so much more to talk about in my channel in addition to this mini series that I'm doing. So if you're interested in topics like fitness, health, and technology from the perspective of a second year DPT student, I post every week, so please consider subscribing and dropping a like for this video. If you guys are familiar with Joe Rogan Experience, a podcast hosted by Joe Rogan, if you're not very familiar with it, you might have heard of Naval. That's where I was first introduced to him. So like Joe Rogan says when he was introducing Naval to his audience on his podcast, Naval's a big-time angel investor. He's invested in more than 100 companies. Yet he seems to really prioritize happiness, and he seems to enjoy publicly talking about how to prioritize happiness just as much as he likes giving startup advice. There are many strategies and tactics you can learn from his chapter in this book, Tools of Titans, but one quote that I wanted to share today was, "Desire is a contract you make with yourself to be unhappy until you get what you want." You might have heard this before, but PT School is full of type A students that are super competitive and really have that drive to get good grades. And chances are, if you are in PT program, you yourself is a type A student because you've probably had to work really hard to get there. And in the slightest of chances that you're not one of those type A students, your friends and your classmates probably are. And as human beings, we really tend to reflect our surroundings. So what I'm trying to say with all this is it's easy to be discouraged by exam grades or practical grades, because those grades oftentimes, in my opinion, don't really reflect the effort that you put into it. Whatever the reason may be, whether it's because you're so used to getting A's in college and now that you're in PT school, it's just not as easy to get A's anymore, or if it's because you had to readjust your studying schedule or life happened, whatever it may be, disappointments and discouragements because of exam grades happen. I've seen it happen to so many friends around me in PT school, and it's happened to me myself. However, getting A's in PT school simply might be a mere desire, like Naval says, because number one, it's not the best goal in my opinion, because yes, you have to really learn the material and you have to set yourself up for success when the time comes for you to take the MPTE, but really all you need to do is pass at this point. And number two, you're gonna be unhappy until you really get that A. And let's just say you did get an A and that made you really happy. That happiness only is gonna last until it's time for you to study for the next exam. So I think prioritizing what makes you happy before school even starts is very important, because you don't want to be going through a 3-year journey of PT school being discouraged and disappointed because your goal isn't the best goal when it comes to reaching happiness. Alright, so the next profile that I want to introduce to you guys is Scott Belsky. He is an investor, he's an author and an entrepreneur. Co-founded Behance in 2006, and they later sold Behance to Adobe in 2012. So in this chapter, he says, young creative minds don't need more ideas. They need to take more responsibility with the ideas that they've already got. This is me sharing my difficulties that I've had in PT school, where I felt like I was falling in this trap of thinking there's only one safe answer to a rehab plan for the set of diagnoses that I've given for a patient case. Alright, so this is what I mean by that. Let's just say we're working with a patient in an acute care setting, for example, and they just had a major surgery, so there's a lot of precautions like weight-bearing status. I should be aware of the medications that they're taking, and there could be other post-surgical protocols that I should be aware of, and rightfully so. I mean, there's a lot going on in this case. I'm not saying I don't like that. That's not what I'm saying. But if there's so much stuff going on in terms of what I need to eliminate, it kind of forces me in the direction of, okay, what's the safest option here? What can I do to reduce all the risks? And for me, the most fun I have with physical therapy and coming up with a rehab plan is being creative. I say all this because I love seeing people in our field be creative, whether that's coming up with exercises that accommodate for every need of this patient, or whether that's coming up with the perfect orthotic that works for this patient, or seeking out a business opportunity in our healthcare field. I think the only way for our profession to really grow is to think out of boundary and be creative. And we're not going to grow by doing something that we've been doing all these years. So naturally, I tend to have a lot of discussion with friends and people in the physical therapy community online on some of the creative projects and fun ideas that they came up with. And most of the time I hear it, I'm like, whoa, that's a genius idea. I think you should definitely stick with it and see where it goes. But it doesn't happen all the time. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, yes, it's important to get good grades in PT school and pass the MPT. That should be the priority, but I don't think anybody should be afraid to test out their ideas and be creative in our field, because like I said earlier, that's just how our field is going to grow, not by continuously doing something that we've been doing for all these years. Okay, so next up we got Jason Niemer, who is the founder of Acro Yoga, which I think is pretty mainstream in today's world. And he mentions in this chapter, I feel like people are so serious, and it doesn't take much for people to drop back into the wisdom of a childlike playfulness. Another big reason why I enjoy helping people through their rehab process is because I can always incorporate fun and play into my rehab plan. I don't think it always has to be about grind and sweat and heavy lifting, although I think there's certainly a time and place for that. But I think if we go that extra step as a clinician to really think about how I can make this session more fun and more functional for the patient that I'm working with, I think you'd have a lot of fun, and the patient definitely will have more fun than just doing 3 sets of 10s of whatever exercise they've been given. And not just in PT, but I think myself included, we all tend to get a little too serious in our lives. So lightening up a little bit and, incorporating play into our life in general is pretty wise. Okay, so this was part 2 of my Tools of Titan series, 10 lessons I learned from this book and how I managed to apply it in my life as a full-time DPT student and a future physical therapist. If you guys have any questions or comments, I would love to see them down below, and I'll see you guys next week. Thanks.